Hey guys, Missy Renee here, and today I wanted to talk about something that actually gets brought up quite often. And it was brought up as a question in the Q&A that I held yesterday, and I just saw it as I was signing off, and I didn't get the chance to answer it. And I was like, damn it, because it was a really good question. And this person was asking about the Sabbath period. And that's something I wanted to definitely dig into a little deeper and talk about because though I've talked about it before on this channel, but A, it's been a while. It was one of my earlier videos. And B, this is something that gets brought up a lot. And it's important to have an understanding about the Sabbath, what it is, and ultimately the aim in getting there and what happens when we get there and all of that. So answering all of those bases, and really wanted to do more of a thorough, in-depth video on this topic anyways. So I figured probably best that I did this separately from the Q&A. But regardless, if you are interested in learning more about manifestation and conscious creation in general, whatever it is that you are trying to manifest, definitely be sure to subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to hit that thumbs up button if you enjoy my videos, because this helps the YouTube algorithm boost this content in front of more and more people so that more people can get this really helpful information as they're going through this transformation of their lives. So I guess starting off with what exactly the Sabbath is, for those of you who may not have heard of this before or heard of this term before. And essentially, the Sabbath is a period of rest, and it's referred to in the Bible as the seventh day or the day of rest. But when it comes to manifestation, or how that's translated in conscious creation, is the knowing that what we've imagined is done and that there's no work left to do. It's essentially the state of the wish fulfilled, in knowing that what you've imagined has been impressed subconsciously and that there is nothing left to do and that it must come about. It is a very calm feeling. It's a very peaceful feeling. It's a feeling of satisfaction and knowing that what's done is done and it's on its way. And this is ultimately the aim of what we want to get to. So when people have asked in the past, how do I know when it's been impressed? How do I know that I've been doing this right and that, this imaginal act is in fact going to come to pass? Well, as I've said before, you can't miss it. You can't miss this. You will know the difference. It's not a subtle difference. It is a stark knowing. But one thing that does get brought up often that I also want to address in this video is periods of time where it feels like we're in the Sabbath, but then doubts start to come up again, or we start to react to the 3D. We might start noticing that there hasn't been any movement and that it's been a while, and where is it? Is this really working? So we sort of end up tumbling back into that old state of doubting ourselves or doubting the process. And that is extraordinarily common. And I wanted to mainly make this video to make that point specifically. When we enter the Sabbath period, it is a very delightful period. It is a intense knowing. It's that satisfaction that there's nothing left to do. And we also have a feeling of we don't want to do the techniques anymore, or we don't really feel that urge or that need to keep doing these techniques. A lot of times it can almost be alarming to some people. A lot of people have asked me, Missy, lately I've been feeling like I don't even want to do the techniques. Is this normal? Does this mean that I don't want my desire anymore? Does this mean that, I did something wrong? And I want to assure everybody, if this is something you've experienced, that no, this is a normal feeling that comes with being in the Sabbath. Because when something is done and you know that it's done, then there's no work left to do. There's nothing left to do. So naturally, the feeling of that sort of urgency, or that, needing to take some kind of action to make something happen is no longer going to be there. We're not going to have that sort of urge anymore to need to do the techniques. Now, that said, we still might want to, because it feels nice to do so, but it's not that feeling of, I need to keep doing this, I need to keep going, if that makes sense. So the ultimate aim is the Sabbath period. That's what we want to persist until we reach. As whatever that may take, we don't know, of course, the allotted length of time to reach the Sabbath period. It's going to be different for everybody. Every seed has its appointed hour, as Neville would say. But that's really the aim of what we're trying to do here, and that's the goal of what we're trying to get to, is that place of knowing that it's done. Now, a lot of times what will happen, and this is what I don't see talked about really much anywhere, is once we obtain the Sabbath, once we move into the state of knowing that it's done, we want to keep that Sabbath. We want to maintain it. And this is really the crux of why I wanted to make this video, because again, it is very common for people to reach this period of the Sabbath, but then start to question again. They may find themselves starting to ease back into that old state and be dominated again by fears and doubts and the logic and reason mind, so to speak. It's very, very, very common for this to happen, mainly due to our nature's habit, due to the fact that we are habitual creatures. And since we've been primed to use that logic and reason mind, and because of how primed we are to reacting to the 3D, of course, it's going to feel more natural to live in that state initially, versus a state of faith and knowing that it is done and there's nothing left to do. So we may find ourselves in a period where we're in the Sabbath, but for whatever reason, whether that's something that happens in the 3D that we react to, or we just start having that creeping doubt and suspicion and questioning coming up in our mind, we end up kind of falling out of that Sabbath state. And this is common. And I want to assure everybody that if this happens to you, it's not because you did anything wrong. It's not because you're fundamentally broken. It's not because that you messed it up somewhere, somehow, or that it's not working for you. This is something that naturally happens along the way. And we're instructed in the Bible to keep the Sabbath. And that is ultimately translating into maintaining that state of the wish fulfilled. So once we get into that Sabbath, we want to keep it. We want to maintain it. And if we fall out of the Sabbath, if we start to notice ourselves questioning or doubting or reacting to the 3D, we want to catch ourselves and we want to move ourselves back into that state of the wish fulfilled. That's what that means. And this is ultimately, again, this is the aim of what we are trying to do. As far as what we're doing consciously, this is all that we are instructed to do, because the rest of it takes place subconsciously. The rest of it is ways in which we could never consciously know about or conceive to have happen. And this is why we're instructed not to worry about the how and the when. As difficult as that is for some of us sometimes, that's not our job consciously. The only thing that we must do is be aware of the state of consciousness that we're occupying, be aware of the concept of self that we're embodying and that we're identifying with, and be aware of what we're doing in our day-to-day, being mindful of the inner conversations that we're carrying, our mental diet, what our feeling and mood is throughout the day, whether or not we are actually living in the state of the wish fulfilled or not, whether or not we are keeping that Sabbath. And I felt that that was a very important point that needed to be that I needed to make sure it came across, is keeping the Sabbath. And that's really all of what we're instructed to do. So if you find yourself in that state where you know everything's done, you feel good, you don't have a need or desire to do any more techniques, you have that feeling of it's done, but then maybe a couple days go by or a week goes by and something happens, or you start to question yourself, that you are instructed to keep the Sabbath. So when this happens, all you need to do is start to, in imagination, prepare that place again. Go back into that state of the wish fulfilled, the same way as before, through imagination. Just as we do with everything in this world. We enter in and out of states through imagination. You can think of it as the doorway. You can think of it as the means in which we hold this creative power. And that helps us to determine or move into whatever state of consciousness that we're focusing on and that we are keeping our attention on, that lines up with the beliefs and assumptions that we carry. So the Sabbath period is something that is ultimately what we aim to achieve, because once there truly is nothing to do. And we have that satisfaction in knowing that it is done, it must come to pass. That's all there is to it. And if we fall out of that state, if we do notice ourselves begin to question or doubt or try to manipulate with reason and logic, become aware of what we're doing, and then turn our focus and attention back to the state of the wish fulfilled. And we do that as many times as we need to do that. We continue to maintain that state, to keep the Sabbath, because by doing so, that is how we manifest in that desire that was once an imaginal act. That's how it becomes something that we experience in the 3D, in our physical reality. So I really wanted to make that distinction today. I really wanted to make sure that there was understanding there because of how important this is. A lot of times what we end up doing, what a lot of people end up doing is, because they noticed maybe they noticed and caught themselves having negative thoughts, maybe they, became aware that they were not keeping the Sabbath and that they were entertaining things that they don't want. A lot of times when people do that, they start to panic and they start to say, oh God, I've just ruined everything. I was thinking these bad thoughts, or I was in a really pissy mood yesterday and I was feeling really sad and I was feeling really angry. And oh God, this means I must have ruined everything. No, that's not what that means. That's not what that means. It just, when we catch ourselves, instead of fear and panic, instead of being stricken by fear and panic, just note that, oh, this isn't what I want. This isn't what I want to create. This is not the state I want to embody. I'm going to instead turn my focus and attention back to that state of the wish fulfilled. Rinse, repeat. And that's really all there is to it. Because if we instead continue to let fear guide us, if we let fear sort of lead the way, so to speak, we're just going to wind up perpetuating cycles that we don't want. So if you find yourself not keeping the Sabbath, if you find yourself having a bad day or falling out of that state of the wish fulfilled, it's okay. That happens, and it happens all the time. All we need to do consciously is become aware of it when we do so, and then shift the focus and attention back to the state of the wish fulfilled. 70 times 7, as Neville used to say, as it is instructed in the Bible. When we do that, when we keep the Sabbath, when we're able to move ourselves back into that state, even after we've fallen out of it, if we drop the fear and assumptions that we're doing this wrong or that we mess things up, that's how everything unfolds for us. Because the truth of the matter is, you cannot ruin your manifestation unless you deem it true, unless you decide that it is ruined. That is literally the only way. Because at any time, if you find yourself not keeping the Sabbath, if you find yourself fallen out of the state of the wish fulfilled, all you need to do is move back. Is move back there in imagination. Turn the focus and attention back to the desired state and living as what you desire to experience instead in imagination. You do that, it must come to pass. Period. So that's really everything to know and understand about the Sabbath period. That this is what we ultimately aim to achieve, and this is what we ultimately aim to embody, because once we experience the Sabbath and we keep that Sabbath, it must become, it must unfold. We will experience it in the 3D. And you cannot ruin your manifestation just because you spiraled or just because you had a bad day. That's not how this works, because we're always, 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 always manifesting. The only way that we can fail is if we don't keep the Sabbath and we just maintain that unwanted state instead. That's literally it. But once you're able to maintain that, once you're able to keep your focus and you move yourself back into that state, it becomes easier and easier to do so. And before you know it, you're no longer doing it consciously. You're doing it subconsciously. It becomes perpetual. It becomes habitual. That anytime you find yourself not in the desired state, it's going to feel really freaking weird and you're not going to like it, and you're going to unconsciously, without thinking about it, move back. And this is the ultimate aim, and this is what we want to achieve. So let this be the roadmap to follow. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the specific desire itself. It is about maintaining the state. Because everything comes from the state. Everything manifests from that state. Once you keep that state of the wish fulfilled, once you keep the Sabbath, it has to unfold. And it will unfold naturally and effortlessly in ways that you could not consciously conceive. So make sure that you keep the Sabbath. If you do find yourself out of the state of the wish fulfilled, if you do find yourself not keeping the Sabbath, that's okay. It happens. All you need to do is go back and prepare that place again in imagination. You do this, that is how you manifest anything that you want. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I just had to pop on and make this really quick and get this out there. I thought this was a really good question that I didn't get the chance to answer in the Q&A, but figured that it would be best to have a separate video on this topic anyways, because it's a really important one and it's one that a lot of people grapple with. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Also, if you are interested in any of my other resources, such as one-on-one coaching, my blog, my social channels, my Facebook group, all of that good stuff, I've got it down in the description box below. So definitely don't forget to check it out. Also, don't forget to check out the other videos on this channel. Each of them are going into different topics, but they all talk about how to manifest the very best life possible. So as always, guys, until we meet again, much love to all of you. Please take care, be well, and never forget how powerful you truly are. Till next time, guys, happy manifesting.